step in making a delicious pumpkin pie starts with your crust. That really is the foundation for every pie that I make. It's the crust. I like to make my crust from scratch. There is no comparison to a store-bought pie crust and a pie crust made from scratch. Just ask my family. Once we've got our pie crust made and it's sitting in the refrigerator, the next step is to make the pumpkin puree that will be the basis for our pumpkin pie. You can go to the store and get a can of pumpkin pie puree. However, I don't know how long that can has been sitting on the shelf. What happens with aluminum cans is that aluminum can leach into the food that is sitting in that can, and that in turn goes into our bodies. So we want to stay away from that as much as possible. The best way to do that is to grow your own pumpkin pie, or you can buy one at the grocery store in the produce section. This is a pie pumpkin. They are grown specifically to make pies. The smaller they are, the better, because then you have more concentration of the pumpkin. The larger you get, the more water you're going to have, and it's just going to be a little more challenging. So I just recommend a medium-sized pie pumpkin. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut this guy open. Make sure you have a really good knife, because it can be a little tough. Okay, we've got it open, and then I'm just going to spoon out the seeds here to get it ready to go in the oven. You can save these seeds and you can use them. You can roast them to eat, or you can crush them to put in your dog's food. It's a natural dewormer for dogs and for cats, as well as other animals. Okay, I've got all the seeds out of my pie pumpkin, and the next step is to add a little bit of oil around the rims of the halves. And the reason we're going to do that is because we're going to lay these down, face down into a baking dish or a pan. And you want to make sure that these areas do not stick to the bottom of that baking dish. Okay, that's good. And I'm just going to take this stem off. I'm going to lay these face down. Some of that seed off. There we go. And these are going to go into the oven at 375 degrees for about an hour and a half. That's kind of loose. You want to really check it just to make sure. Just take a fork and pierce the skin. If the fork comes out smooth, then your pumpkin is ready. I am ready for my next step to make my pumpkin pie. I've got my pie crust here that has been chilling in the refrigerator, and it's ready for its next step. Now, when you're making a pumpkin pie, it's going to be a little different than some of your other pies. You're going to want to cook the pie crust a little bit before you add the filling. So that's what I'm going to do now. The first thing I'm going to do is take some aluminum foil, and I'm going to lay it down inside of the pie. Why do I do that? Well, we are going to add some pie weights here, and the reason for that, if you put this pie crust in the oven to cook, it's going to bubble up and get really big, and we're going to try to keep it from doing that. And one of the ways you can do that is by adding pie weights, or if you don't have pie weights, use some dried beans. I have been using this same bag of dried beans for about 10 years, and they work great. I don't know why I've never broken down and got pie weights, but these work pretty good, so I'm just going to stick with those. You've got your pie crust lined with aluminum foil so that your pie weights or your beans do not stick to your dough. And all I'm going to do is pour it right in, and that will give it enough weight so that it doesn't bubble up in the oven. I'm going to take this cast iron and I'm gonna put it in the oven at 350 degrees for about 20 minutes. And then we'll go on to the next step. We'll take it out and we'll start adding the filling. Okay, I finished cooking the pumpkins. Mine were in there for about an hour. You can see where I pierced the fork just to make sure they were ready. And this gives you an idea what the skins are gonna look like when they're done. The next thing I'm gonna do is just pick it up. There's one seed that got left in there. I'm gonna take my spoon and just scoop it out. Sometimes you can just peel off the skin, and that, like you can see, it's just coming right off. Okay, got a little bit of skin in there. There we go. I'm gonna put it in this container for right now because what I wanna do is use my immersion blender to smooth it out. You can use a Vitamix, a blender, a food processor. I just find it easy to throw my immersion blender in there and get it nice and smooth. Okay, this is the consistency that I want. I'm just going to scrape off my immersion blender here. We don't want to waste this yummy puree. And I'm just going to hold this up so that you can see what the inside should look like. You see how it doesn't really fall off the spoon. If it's drippy, you're going to want to, well, that fell off the spoon. If it's drippy, you're going to want to strain it a little bit, but this is really good. It's actually holding its shape pretty well. I've got my pumpkin puree. I am ready to make the pie. Okay, we are ready to add our pie filling ingredients. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with the eggs. The first thing we're going to do is crack 2 eggs into the bowl. And what I love about pumpkin pie filling is literally you are just dumping everything into a bowl and whisking it together and then pouring it into the pie crust. Okay, got my 2 eggs here. And the next thing I'm going to add is the brown sugar. You want 3/4 a cup of brown sugar. And to tell you a little trick, if you don't have brown sugar, you can take 3/4 a cup of sugar and add a little bit of molasses to it, and that creates the brown sugar, which is typically what I do. I don't have brown sugar on hand. I prefer to just get the sugar and then add the molasses. You can do whichever you choose. Okay, we have our brown sugar. Next, we're going to add our pumpkin, which is the star of the show. All right, you can use a 15-ounce can, like I said earlier, or you can just gauge about 15 ounces. This is about 1 pie pumpkin that I am using. But if you want exact measurements, you're going to use 15 ounces of pumpkin puree. Okay, we've got our pumpkin puree. Next comes the cream. Okay, you can use half and half for this recipe. I highly recommend you use cream. It just gives it a richer, a depth of flavor that you don't get with half and half. We're gonna add 1 cup of cream, or half and half, if you feel more comfortable. I challenge you though, try that cream. Okay, next we are going to add in the vanilla. We're going to do a 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. If you're wondering why my bottle is so funky, it's because I make my own vanilla. Okay, there's the vanilla. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add our spices. We're gonna start with ginger. I am going to add, let's rinse this off. I'm gonna add 1/4 of a teaspoon of ginger. I'm going to add 1/4 of a teaspoon of cloves, clove powder, that is. You don't want to add whole cloves. That would not be a good pie. Okay, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. A good teaspoon here of cinnamon. And then for the nutmeg, I just grab a nut and I grate about 1/4 of a teaspoon of nutmeg into the bowl. You can kind of eyeball this one. I like to have fresh nutmeg on ham. I feel like it makes a better flavor. Okay, that's good. All right, we're gonna add a little bit of salt. We are going to add 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Okay. All right, and we have got all our ingredients in the bowl. The next thing we're gonna do is mix it up, and then it's ready to be poured into the pie. All right, we're done whisking the ingredients, and this pie filling is ready to be put into the pie crust. Now let's move to the pie crust. All right, we are on our final step of this delicious pumpkin pie. I pulled the skillet out of the oven. I took out the aluminum foil and the dried beans from inside, and I let it cool for a little while. You want it cooled before you put your pumpkin pie filling into the pie plate. All right, I'm gonna show you what it looks like when it comes out of the oven this first time around. The crust is not gonna be totally done. It's just about halfway there. When we put the pie filling in and put it in the oven, it will finish cooking. All right, I've got my pumpkin pie filling here, which is amazing. And I'm just gonna pour that in. I wanna scrape all of that goodness in there. I don't wanna leave anything out. Okay, the final step. I'm going to put this in the oven at 350 degrees for about an hour. You're waiting for this pie filling to set. Our pie is finished. This is the best part of the whole process because we get to eat it. I pulled it out of the oven. It's been in there for about an hour. And the next thing is to put it in the refrigerator and let it chill for an hour. You can do that and it'll set even more. If you eat it now, it's going to have a little bit more of a, just not as strong. It'll be a little looser with the filling. If you stick it in the fridge, that gives it the rigidity to stand up and not be a little softer. Sometimes I put it in the refrigerator for an hour, and sometimes I don't. The smell, I just can't get over the smell, and so sometimes we just have to go ahead and eat it, and I think that's what we're gonna do right now. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope it put any fears to rest of the intimidation of making a pie from scratch. If you like the video, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more great content. Thank you so much for watching, and happy Thanksgiving.